Kia ora, hello, I'm Philip Duncan. Thank you for joining us for our special update here on Thursday, December 22nd. Today is the summer solstice, which means it's the longest day of the year for the Southern Hemisphere, and we've got our shortest night of the year on the way. Now, you could be a bit bleak and say, well, doesn't that mean as of now the days start to get shorter again? Technically, yes, but you won't really notice it until later into January. And then there's the thermal lag. The hottest part of summer is still another 4 to 6, 7 weeks away from now. So summer is really only just getting going today. And so for those of you who have been saying so much for summer, maybe you can sort of reset and go, well, it starts now. And therefore the last few weeks weren't quite so stressful. Let's have a look and see what's going on. On the map today, this shows where we've got the biggest downpours developing. Now this video today is not your normal weather watch one. It's sort of a mini climate watch, but it's not quite climate watch. It's not quite a weather forecast. It's sort of somewhere in between. And what we're going to cover off is some of the main weather makers as we go into this weekend. Obviously Christmas weekend, everyone wants to know the weather forecast, but also next week when people are going away on holiday. And of course, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and also how January is shaping up. So we're going to cover sort of the main highlights. Kicking off with the animated map here for Thursday, December the 22nd. Low pressure still in the New Zealand area. That low is falling apart. This shows 3-hour rainfall on this map. So it quite clearly shows that around the North Island and the South Island, we'll be seeing those downpours bubbling up this afternoon. And again, across Australia, more downpours. There's a low pressure zone right up there near Darwin. And in the tropics, we've got plenty of thunderstorms near Fiji, but they're sort of being pushed away towards New Caledonia. So let's have a look and see what's happening on Christmas Eve. A lot of people are asking about the weather. So again, around New Zealand, afternoon downpours are bubbling up into the afternoon and early evening, some with thunderstorms. We've also got a line of thunderstorms and downpours across a large portion of Australia from Brisbane inland all the way up there to Darwin. So that is Christmas Eve. Here is Christmas Day. Not a lot of change. Again, afternoon downpours in New Zealand, but they're most likely to be in rural areas and sort of around the mountains and ranges, not as widespread as they've been. And this is for the end of the day, not lunchtime. So mostly dry across the day, but then at the very end, later into the afternoon, that's where those thunderstorms and downpours will form. And we'll also be seeing some of those around parts of Australia as well on Christmas Day, and also around Fiji. Could be a few thundery areas, but not so bad in Tonga, and not so bad in Rarotonga, and not so bad up in the Samoa region. So we've got a few downpours, but nothing too stormy or dramatic showing up. Now let's take a look further into next week, because a lot of people in New Zealand are heading away on holiday between Christmas and New Year's Eve and the first week of January. So up here to the north is a weak area of low pressure connecting all the way up to the Coral Sea. The airflow coming out from around Fiji and Tonga is dropping right down to Northland. So I think you kind of guess where this is going. Humid and muggy weather, cloudy. We'll be seeing isolated drizzle patches and rain in the mix, but just not very far away is high pressure pushing back against it. So it could be a bit windy. If you're in a tent or an awning, circle next Wednesday, because there could be some gusty winds, which with a tent and an awning, we talk about gale force a lot in our videos, which is about 60 k's an hour or 64 k's an hour. Half of that speed, around the low 30 kilometre an hour mark, is enough to really disrupt you in a tent. So it could be pretty windy up here around parts of the North Island next Wednesday. Over here in Australia, you've got a colder change coming through, a cold front next Wednesday for you. Let's move through to New Year's Eve, and the forecast is actually looking pretty good for New Zealand. But notice this rain out to the northeast. There's another big area of high pressure just here. So between the departing high and the incoming high, we've got some rains that are trapped in between, and that's it there. Very close to a lot of popular camping grounds and places like Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Bay of Islands, and of course Auckland for New Year's Eve. So we'll be keeping an eye on this, but for now the rain is offshore, but there could be a bit of an easterly flow coming through here, bringing in a few showers for holiday makers in those areas. And by the way, that carries on into Australia as well. Sydney, Brisbane, a few showers, nothing much, mostly dry, but you're in that same airflow, that easterly flow. By New Year's Day, high pressure pretty much in charge of New Zealand, but that easterly flow carries on for you. But look at that, fairly dry across many places, even up in the tropics, the usual downpours around Fiji, but nothing too dramatic actually in there, and not a lot of low pressure, considering La Nina is still just with us, but it is starting to fade away. We're going to talk about La Nina in a moment, but lastly, January 5th, This is as far out as our maps go when we recorded this. What it shows is something quite interesting for the New Zealand area. It shows the two main drivers for our climate and weather at the moment. We're talking about La Nina a lot, but it's fairly weak, this La Nina event. It is not a very powerful one. That's why we're not seeing huge amounts of rain and low pressure zones up there. It's not hugely stormy at the moment. But as you'll notice here on the 5th of January and the 4th of January leading up to it, humid tropical airflows coming down across New Zealand. So that humidity, the cloud, the downpours, the morning drizzle patches, and the afternoon thunderstorms, that's all there. But then there's the second feature, nothing to do with La Nina, our usual weather when we're in a neutral weather pattern, which is what we're heading towards in the start of 2023. So La Nina is going to fade early next year, and then the windy westerlies start to dominate more and more. So you can see La Nina northerlies here with the tropical sort of weather, and then behind it, the usual windy westerlies coming through. So a bit of variety in the New Zealand area as we head towards the 5th of January. And I think as we go into the month of January, expect a fair amount of variety. Kind of like I said, December was going to be a watered down version of November. January is probably going to be a weaker version of December. So we're sort of gradually coming out of this very wet spell. But as you can see, we're not done with it just yet. There's still going to be more passing wet weather in the New Zealand area. Let's take a look at La Nina. It is still with us. This is from the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia, who we use for all of our El Nino and La Nina forecasting. So this is where we've been. We've been right hovering along that line. This is La Nina down here in the blue. Up here, that's the measurement for El Nino, the opposite. So we are at the moment really just in this La Nina area. Now this is a bit of a forecast in here. When they actually review back, it may well dip down a little bit into the blue. But look what happens when we come into January. All of these lines here are the different modeling from different agencies all around the world, and very consistently, you can see that line heading up towards El Nino. But one last feature to talk about, the Bureau of Meteorology say at this time of the year, this long-range forecasting actually isn't at its best, which means you can't really go beyond April with any certainty. So while it does look as though it goes right up into El Nino, bit of caution that the modelling at this time of the year isn't quite as accurate as at the other time of the year. I'm not quite sure why, but they've got that statement on their site today. So here we are with the model of all models for January, and this shows, and this was only issued yesterday, the 20th of December, this still shows most of the international models are leaning towards La Nina, technically out of La Nina, but you know, it won't be a lot of difference in our weather pattern, put it that way. So while it does technically look like it fades away in the month of January, still very much leaning in towards that warmer than average sort of side of things. Interesting to note that it's the American model that's still sticking with La Nina. The British one has been the one doing that in the past. That's pulling back a wee bit. So that is a January. Let's go to April. That's about as far as the Bureau of Meteorology say we can go with sort of any real accuracy. And as you can see, right in the neutral zone, but starting to lean a little bit towards El Nino. And that means more high pressure is expected in the Tasman Sea area and more westerlies for New Zealand, and it cools the sea surface temperatures up in the equator north of New Zealand. So that's what is likely to happen as we go through 2023. Before I go, let's take a look at the rainfall right through until the 5th of January, so basically the next 2 weeks. At a glance, you might find this confusing because there's two sets of blues. But the first blue, not much rain, drizzle, is always surrounded by the greens and the yellows. So where you see the pale blue and green and yellow right at the bottom of the scale. So for the next 2 weeks, very little rain coming is good news for Victoria. You'll be very happy about that, with the Murray River still flooding from the heavy rain you had a couple of months ago, which is absolutely stunning to me that it is still peaking in some areas. So this is good news to see it dry. So a lot of dry areas around there. In New Zealand, a lot of dry to the east and to around Southland. But of course, Southland, you've got those afternoon downpours, so it won't be for everybody. Some of you will have higher rainfall totals. But what you see from this map at a glance is the La Nina rainmakers just coming very close to northern New Zealand. So what you're seeing in the blue there is 150 to 200 millimetres, and then what you're seeing in the red in the North Island there is around 60 to 80. So there is 3 times as much rain, just a little bit offshore. Here is a closer up version of that exact same map. So what you're seeing is drier around the eastern and southern parts of the South Island, fairly dry through Cook Strait, and the heaviest rain coming into the north there and along the west. And don't forget that one last sort of disclaimer, These afternoon downpours we're getting at the moment will mean that some of you get much more than is forecast. I get complaints all the time about this, and I don't know how else to explain it. We can't forecast every downpour, just like you can't get on a plane and fly to the other side of the world in 1 hour. Even though you want to, can't do it. So we can't forecast every shower. So we always say, when you see a map like that, take into consideration you might get a downpour. So if your forecast today says 10 millimeters and you get a thunderstorm, you might get 40 millimeters. It could be 3 or 4 times what is generally forecast. So I hope that makes some sense to you. I mean, I wish it was perfect as well, but we're just not there yet. Maybe in 2053, we might be able to forecast every shower. It's certainly possible. The technology is getting there. We're starting to see downpours, the big ones. We're starting to forecast them in advance, but we're not quite there yet at predicting what will happen on your barbecue at 2 o'clock next Sunday with one specific shower. We're just not quite there yet with the technology, globally that is, not just with the Weather Watch. Anyway, that is all from me. I could talk forever. That is all from me. Back again tomorrow, Friday, with our final update of 2022. We'll see you then.